Howdy folks, welcome back for another lesson in the CompTIA Network Plus course. In this video, we'll be discussing network types. So let's start this video off by first discussing what are the different network types. Now when it comes to the different network types, there are actually many. So let's list some of them for you guys. The first type of network you get, which is actually very common, is a peer-to-peer network. Then we also have a client-server network, which some might say is the exact opposite of the peer-to-peer network. Another very common everyday network you'll encounter is a PAN, which stands for Personal Area Network. This one could easily be one of the most common networks you'll encounter, and you'll see why once we discuss this in a few moments. You also get a network called LAN, which stands for Local Area Network. This is probably one of the first networks most people in IT will become familiar with, and most of you watching this probably already know this one. Besides the LAN network, you also get something called a MAN network, or Metropolitan Area Network, if you want to use the full name, that is. Then you also get a network called a WAN, or Wide Area Network. And then lastly, folks, you also get a network called WLAN, which is pretty much the same thing as a LAN network, which we mentioned earlier, except the W stands for wireless. So the full name for this network is Wireless Local Area Network. Same thing as a LAN, it's simply just wireless. Now that we have a nice list of the network types for us, let's start discussing these network types one by one, starting the first one here on the list being the peer-to-peer network. With peer-to-peer networks, no device is a client, nor is any device a server. They're all actually both a client and a server. Yep, that's right. All devices in a peer-to-peer network act as both a client as well as a server. This obviously brings with a few benefits and drawbacks like you would expect of any type of network. The first thing to note about this network, which is not necessarily a benefit or a drawback, is just the way the network works, is the fact that every device communicates or talks to every other device on the network. Some of you folks might have already guessed that part though, as soon as I mentioned that every device is both a client and a server. Now, getting to some of the benefits of this specific network, it's actually probably one of the most easiest networks to set up or deploy. There is pretty much nothing complicated about it at all. Never mind this network being so easy to set up or deploy, it's also one of the cheapest networks to set up. Like you would expect though, this network also has its fair share of drawbacks. What are those drawbacks, you might ask? Well, administration of this type of network is very problematic. There is no real structure of every device being both a client and a server. It's going to be very difficult to control, for example, what people can do and what they can't do, and just general network settings, quite frankly. Another drawback of this type of network is it's very difficult to secure. This is obviously for the same reasons once again. If security is of concern, then, well, a peer-to-peer network is most definitely not what you're supposed to go and use. So if you don't care about security, then yeah, sure, go for it. But if you're concerned about security, which most of us IT guys are, I would not recommend using a peer-to-peer network. Some of the most common places where you'll encounter a peer-to-peer network is when folks go online to download movies and games. A lot of people, especially in IT, don't like paying for stuff, so they get stuff, well, via not so nice ways. It usually involves going to some sort of website of some kind, downloading a torrent of some kind, which basically allows you to go and download whatever that content is directly from other people's machines on the internet, or other people that's connected to the internet. So instead of you connecting, to some server online and downloading that movie or that game from that server, you are downloading that movie, that game, or whatever it might be from other folks' machines directly. So this obviously means, you can get a hold of stuff that you otherwise would not get a hold of. But it is not something I would recommend because it's very unsecure, and this is the quickest way you're going to get some malware on your machine. So it's a no-no. Please don't go and do that, folks. Alright, folks, let's go back to our list of network types. What's next here on lists? Oh yeah, client-server networks. Now, of the client-server network type, there is a central communication point, and this central communication point is usually a server. The clients talk, or I suppose you can say communicate, with the server, which is once again the central communication point. The clients could be many devices, but in most cases you'll find that these clients are probably going to be something like a laptop or, well, a desktop PC. Something else worth mentioning is, unlike peer-to-peer networks, there is no client-to-client communication taking place with a client-server network. So remember, clients communicate to a central communication point in a client-server network. This obviously has its own, sets of benefits and drawbacks. So if you look at, for example, the bottom right here we have three devices. Now, instead of these three devices communicating with each other directly, they all three will be communicating with a central communication point, which we spoke of earlier. That central communication point obviously being a server of sorts in most cases. Okay, and then regarding the benefits of this specific type of network, the first thing is you'll have better performance. Well, at least especially if you compare this network to the previous peer-to-peer network, you'll have better performance. This client-server network will also give you much better administration. You'll have way more control of your network if you use this type of network due to the central communication point once more. From there, you'll be able to configure all kinds of configurations, including security settings. Speaking of security, that brings us to another benefit. You'll also have much better security. Like we just said, you can configure way more with this network, and that includes obviously the security settings. You have way more control over what people can actually do, what they cannot do, what they can access, what they cannot access, and just general network settings. This network also has its own drawbacks, like you'd expect, one of which is that it's way more expensive, at least more expensive than the peer-to-peer network we spoke of earlier. The central communication point, which is most likely going to be a server, is going to be one of the biggest contributors to the additional cost. Another drawback is this network's complexity. It's way more complex compared to a peer-to-peer, which was a pretty much straightforward type of network. Okay, folks, let's go back to our list of networks again and check what's next. Next up on our list here, we have the Personal Area Network, or PAN for short. This one usually confuses most folks, since most have never heard of this one. Funny thing is, this is something almost everyone uses without even knowing it. Hopefully now you're curious when I say it's something most of us use but don't actually know it. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about this network is it's actually one of the most common networks found. Yeah, I know it doesn't help when I say it like that now, does it? Second thing you need to know about it is it's one of the smallest networks you'll actually find. This small network, being the PAN obviously, also usually only has one person in it. Yeah, I'm serious, folks. A PAN network in most cases only has one person in it. It might contain more than one device, but it will usually only have one person in that network. I'm probably confusing you folks even more by now. Okay, so let's back up a bit. A PAN network, which is obviously stands for Personal Area Network, is basically when you have one person with multiple devices. You can imagine this as sitting at your desk with your desktop PC or your laptop, and then simply just connecting that desktop PC or that laptop to other things close by, like your printer, your scanner, heck, maybe even your phone. So when you're sitting at your desk, everything that's basically within, I suppose you can say within the arm's reach, that is a personal area network. So it's not exactly like that, but I mean, you can basically go and say everything you can fit on your desk. That basically classifies as your personal area network. So it's not limited to just that, and it doesn't just extend to just that, but that's a very good way of explaining it. So you can imagine yourself sitting at a desk with your desktop PC or your laptop, and pretty much everything that's within arm's reach on that desk, like a printer, scanner, your phone, whatever that you can go and connect to your laptop or your desktop, that forms part of your PAN, being your personal area network. Now, how you connect to these devices doesn't matter. It still forms part of the PAN. This could be via a wire, some sort of cable. Could be via network cable. Could be via some form of USB cable. It could potentially be wireless. Which brings us to the different kinds of wireless frequencies you could potentially go and use with this network, which is things like Bluetooth, infrared, NFC. I mean, obviously, it's not just limited to those kinds, but that's some of the most common kinds you can expect to find in a PAN. So when you use Bluetooth to connect your laptop and your phone, that's a form of a PAN. Or you could go and use your USB cable that came with the phone. When you use Bluetooth to connect your phone to your car's audio system or just your car in general, what do we call that, folks? That is a PAN. When you use NFC to connect one phone to another or something like that, what do we call that? It is a PAN, folks. Alright, so I think that pretty much covers a PAN. It's the smallest kind of network you get. As you guys can see, it could potentially involve more than one device, and it normally will involve more than one device. It's usually, in most cases, going to be only one person. Unless you go and connect your phone to someone else's phone, then it might be two people, obviously, Alright, so let's go back to that list of ours from earlier. What do we have next here on our list? LAN, Local Area Network. Now, what can we say about a LAN? Now, as we've said earlier, a LAN is probably one of the most common networks. Well, I suppose you could say it's one of the most common networks. It's definitely one of the networks that most folks will already know about. You might not know exactly what it is. You might not know exactly how it works. But if you're in IT, this is probably one of the very first networks that you probably would have heard of. I mean, everybody in IT has at least heard of a LAN. You might not have done it, you might not have configured it or even used it, but you surely would have heard of the word LAN, which stands for Local Area Network. So LAN networks are generally within one building, but they could potentially extend to more than one. Although in most cases you're going to find a LAN network is within one building. Now, a LAN network is obviously also not just limited to just desktop computers or laptops. It could be either or both. In most cases, you'll find it's going to be both. It can actually also include phones and tablets and all of that. So what exactly is a LAN? So a LAN is when you are within your home, your office building, all of those devices at your office or your home that's connected to one another. That network, folks, is a LAN in most cases. Now, this office could be very big. It could be, I don't know, it could be small as maybe 5 people, 20 people. It could potentially have 100 or even up to 1,000 people. It is still a LAN in most cases. So that big office building is still a LAN. As long as they are within that building, it doesn't matter if those devices are connecting to one another via wireless, whether they're connecting, via cable. It is a LAN, a local area network. So I'm going to give you guys a little picture here. I've actually used this in one of my A+ videos when I gave the A+ course. So feel free to go and check that out too if you guys want to watch A+. So if you look at this little picture, I'm going to use it for both LAN, MAN, and WAN. Look at the bottom section of that picture. You can see there's 4 little buildings there. So within each of those buildings, we've obviously got a bunch of laptops, desktops, phones, and tablets. And in every one of those buildings, all of those devices are connected to one another using a LAN. Now, when it gets to MAN is when you go and connect multiple buildings to one another. These buildings could potentially be in different parts of town. So one building is maybe in the south side of town. The other building is on the north side of town. Different sides of town. They could even potentially be in different towns, heck, man. And a WAN is when you go and take those different towns and you go and link those puppies up. So it can actually, it's not exactly what it is, but that's a very good way of explaining it. And this picture I find is a very good way of explaining the difference between a LAN, a MAN, and a WAN. So you might say a LAN is basically limited to within a building. It's not exactly like that, but imagine it like that. A LAN within a building. And a MAN is when you go and take these two different buildings, which could be in opposite sides of town or in different towns, and you link those two buildings with one another, usually done via wireless in most cases. And a WAN is even bigger than that. That is when you go and take these different cities and you link the different cities with one another. And it's very often that you'll find that these different cities might not even be in the same country. They could be in different countries, as you can see in that little picture of mine. But we're jumping the gun here. So let's get to our list again. And obviously on our list here, we can see we're going to be discussing, and you've guessed it, Metropolitan Area Network, being the MAN. Alright, so with regards to the MAN network, as we've said before, MAN is obviously bigger than a LAN. That's when you go and link different LANs to one another. So a MAN is usually larger than a local area network, because we said it's when you go and link different LANs to one another. It's usually smaller though than a WAN, as if you remember that little picture I showed you guys earlier. So MAN was smack bang in the middle there. It's also usually multiple LANs in different buildings connected to one another, as we've said earlier. So I'm going to pop that little picture back up here for you guys. As you can see, MAN is in the middle. So we discussed LAN previously. Now we're on a MAN. MAN is obviously a little bit bigger than a LAN network, but it's still smaller than a WAN network. So a MAN is when you go and take different LANs, different buildings in most cases, and you go and link those different buildings with one another. These two buildings could potentially be right next to one another, but in most cases you'll find they're going to be in different parts of town or in different towns even. Alright, so that's pretty much straightforward, isn't it? Pretty straightforward. Now what is a WAN? And I think you guys can pretty much guess what a WAN is going to be. So going back to our list here, obviously the next topic is going to be, you've guessed it, wide area network being WAN. Alright, so what can we say about WAN? It's usually used to connect networks over great distances. In other words, this could potentially be different countries. So if I've got a man in one country, let's call this country X, and I've got a man in a different country called country Y, and I want to go and link these together. What are we going to call that? It's a WAN. It's going to be a WAN. Now, WANs are generally also multiple MANs connected to one another, as you might expect. Obviously, we know that part already. Could possibly extend over multiple countries. Said that part already, but just to go re-emphasize. And it's usually, in most cases, going to be way slower than a LAN. Now, inside your building, which is where we normally have a LAN, those LANs can get potentially very quick these days. I mean, I remember back in the day, you would have like a 100 megabit line, and it was like a gig. There was like 10 gigs, and nowadays it's even way faster than that, especially if you're going to include fiber in there. So, yeah. WAN, not slow necessarily, but it's going to be way slower than a LAN, unfortunately. So WAN is simply when you're going to take multiple MANs and you're going to connect those puppies to one another. As long as you remember it, different MANs could potentially be in different cities. You're going to connect those different puppies with one another. And this could potentially be in more than one country, and quite frankly, most likely will be in more than one country. Now going back to our little list here, the last one here on our list, folks, is WLAN. And as we've said earlier, it's pretty much the same as a LAN, except this is a wireless LAN. Alright, so what can we say about a WLAN? Not sure if I'm going to be able to tell you guys something that you don't know already, but let's go for it anyway. It is basically a LAN network which is just wireless. We know that part. It uses 802.11 technologies. Now, for those of you folks that don't know what that means, it uses wireless frequencies. So usually when you see 802 dot something, that means it's a network of some kind. If it's .11, it tells you it's wireless. It's a wireless network of some kind. The 11 at the back tells you it's going to be wireless. And normally behind that 11, you'll see some sort of letter which indicates what kind of wireless technology this is, what frequency this is. This letter could potentially be A, so it could be 802.11a, it could be 802.11b, it could be 802.11g, yeah, not C, G. A lot of folks tend to think it's going to be C. There's no such thing. It's 802.11g, 802.11n, and then there's actually a fifth one, 802.11ac. So we are going to discuss these wireless frequencies in much greater depth later on in this series, and this is definitely something you guys need to know for the exam. So once that video comes out, make sure you familiarize yourself with the different types of wireless technologies you get. So you already know that they start with 802.11. So make sure you know the different kinds you get. Make sure you know the frequencies they run at. Make sure you know what they are used for. Make sure you know what their maximum distance is and what their maximum speeds are. All of those things I just mentioned are things you absolutely need to know for the CompTIA Network Plus exam. If you don't know those things, it's going to catch you off guard and you're going to be mad at yourself. So all of those things will be covered in this course later on. So yeah, stay tuned for that. All right, so what else can we say about WLAN? Sometimes good to use in hard to reach areas in a building. Now, why is that? Because some areas in some buildings, it's just nearly impossible to get a cable in there. Maybe the roof, the ceiling is so flat or so low, it's just physically impossible for someone to crawl in there with a network cable. That might be a reason. Or it's just a very weird layout. I don't know, it could be a lot of things. So the point here is, if it's a hard to reach area, maybe you should go and consider using wireless. Why not? That brings us to the fact that it's got lots of flexibility. I mean, you can just literally go and put an access point somewhere or a router somewhere, and as long as the walls aren't too thick and as long as there's not a lot of metal involved, you could potentially get into very weird areas. You can get network connectivity into very weird, hard to reach areas. So that brings us to another point here. Extends easy with additional access points. We just normally call these APs for short. Also something you guys need to know for the exam. So in the exam, they might refer to APs quite a lot. And if you don't know what these abbreviations stands for, it's going to catch you off guard. So what I would encourage you guys to go and do, which is slightly off topic, if you happen to have some form of Network Plus manual, whether it be physical or digital, it doesn't matter. I want you guys to go and make a list of all the abbreviations you can find in that manual. Now, you don't have to worry about the ones you know. So let's say, for argument's sake, you find LAN, and you already know LAN stands for local area network, and you already know what it is. That's fine. Skip it then. But go through that book, digitally or physically, page by page, and find any abbreviation you can find. Any abbreviation you find where you don't know what the abbreviation stands for, or what it actually is, or both, quite frankly, write them down. Write them down on a piece of paper, and then you put that piece of paper somewhere where you can see it every day. Maybe behind your toilet door. I'm not even joking right now. Every day you can see that piece of paper, and when you see that piece of paper, you can go through it while you're doing your business. Maybe you can do it in the kitchen while you're cooking. I wouldn't say put it over the stove, otherwise you might cause a fire, but somewhere where you can see it every day. Every day you can see that little list, you can go through it. You're basically going to memorize it. At the end of the day, that is stuff you're going to have to need to know. The CompTIA Network Plus exam loves asking abbreviations in the exam. Now you might say, okay, so what's the big deal here? Well, they just ask you the abbreviation, and if you don't know what the abbreviation stands for, you're not going to understand the question. In most cases, it's actually going to be a very easy, straightforward question, but now because they're using the abbreviation, you've got no cooking clue what the actual question is. So to avoid finding yourself in a sticky situation like that, familiarize yourself with all the abbreviations. Okay, so we're getting completely off topic here, but I felt like I needed to add that there for you guys because I know it's extremely important for the exam, for the folks that's going to write the exam. All right, so APs, being access points, is simply a way for you to go and extend your wireless network. So all you do is, it looks like a little router. You just plug a network cable into it, and it's going to go and rebroadcast that signal even further. So any place where you've got a weak signal, you're just going to go and drop one of those little APs, and voila, you're going to have additional signal, or stronger signal for that matter. Now, within this wireless local area network, you've got pretty good security. And you can go and enforce this on many places. You can go and do this on the server, you can do this on the routers, you can do this on the access points themselves. But generally, you've got some pretty good security. There's many ways you can go and do it, and many places you can go and do it. Alright folks, so I believe that concludes all the network types on that list. I think we covered them all. So I hope this has been informative. If it has been, like usual, please give the video a like. It does help the video, it does help the channel. And if you'd like to stay up to date as to when I release new content, remember to hit that subscribe button down at the bottom, otherwise you're not going to know. And if you'd like to sponsor the channel, you can find all of that information in the video description down below. Now, speaking of sponsoring the channel, I would like to give a special shout out to the sponsors of this channel. So special thank you to my Patreon sponsors. There's 2 of them at the moment. Maybe it'll be more later on. We never know. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it very much. Alright, folks, that is it for this video. So I hope to see you guys again on the next one. Stay safe. Bye, guys.